At 4:27 a.m., inside Moscow's fortified district, the general staff of the armed forces stood quiet. Suddenly, the silence broke. Ukrainian forces unleashed a storm. UJ-26 kamikaze drones, Flamingo cruise missiles, T-72 tanks, Patriot PAC-3 interceptors on standby, electronic warfare trucks, mine-laying robots, and even sensor-fitted Ravens. From multiple directions, drones skimmed treetop height, while missiles hugged the terrain, and robotic crawlers carrying TM-62 mines pushed toward choke points. This wasn't a feint, it was a full-scale strike aimed to cripple Russia's nerve center. In seconds, calm dissolved into chaos, a brutal lesson in modern war. Don't take your eyes off the screen until the secret is revealed. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts about this battle in the comments section. Thank you for watching. The chaos ignited at 4:27 a.m. did not settle. It grew. From the first wave of drones and robotic crawlers came a larger storm in the skies. Ukrainian planners unleashed a layered package. Patriot PAC-3 batteries stood ready on the outskirts, their radars scanning the horizon, while Su-35 fighters carved corridors of air superiority at altitudes between 20,000 and 30,000 feet. Ahead of them, swarms of FPV drones darted low at nearly 120 miles per hour. Their purpose not to destroy, but to jam Russian sensors and bait defenses. The effect was immediate. Panzer and S-400 crews, startled by the sheer density of incoming signals, began firing prematurely, filling the morning sky with streaks of interceptors and bursts of flares. Radar operators struggled to distinguish real threats from decoys. Within seconds, Moscow's airspace became a chaotic light show, trails of missiles arcing, drones weaving through searchlights, and electronic noise cluttering every frequency. Russia scrambled interceptors, fast jets roaring off runways, but the Ukrainian drones were expendable by design. They absorbed missile fire, detonated on radar nodes, and left empty corridors invisible to the defenders. Through these gaps, the heavier Flamingo cruise missiles advanced undetected, skimming the treetops at barely 100 feet above ground. What began as a blinding drone wave had now become the shield behind which the decisive strike force closed in, pushing Moscow's defenses toward collapse. The chaos in the skies over Moscow was only the beginning. As interceptors and decoys tangled above, the streets surrounding the General Staff compound erupted with a second wave, this time on the ground. Ukrainian T-72 tanks rolled forward in staggered formation, each column separated by 50 to 75 yards to reduce the impact of concentrated fire. Their turrets scanned every avenue, while electronic warfare trucks pushed close behind, broadcasting a storm of interference that jammed radios and disrupted Russian targeting networks. Trailing in the shadows were robotic mine layers, squat machines no larger than a compact car. They crawled deliberately into storm drains, subway shafts, and narrow service alleys, planting TM-62 mines and shaped charges designed to sever access routes. Every minute that passed meant another choke point rigged for demolition, another road denied to Russian reinforcements. Above the rumble of armor, the clatter of smaller tracked crawlers echoed through side streets as they slipped beneath bridges and utility tunnels, embedding explosives that would collapse them at the press of a button. Mixed squads of infantry and robots advanced block by block, not with the intent to hold territory, but to fracture Moscow's defensive rhythm. Soldiers carrying shoulder-fired rockets and suppressed rifles moved house to house, while robotic crawlers scouted intersections ahead. Where Russian patrols appeared, a combination of drones swooping down from above, and robots detonating at street level forced them back in confusion. By 5 a.m., the ring of armor, infantry, and machines had closed within a few hundred yards of the General Staff's outer wall. Every street became a trap, every building a firing position, every alley seeded with hidden charges. The air battle overhead still raged, But now the fight on the ground pressed directly into the Russian nerve center. The strike was no longer distant, it was knocking at Moscow's fortified gates. The armored push on the streets had forced Russian defenders to split their focus, but the real fracture came in the invisible war above their heads. As T-72 seconds and infantry pressed within a few hundred yards of the general staff walls, Ukrainian planners unleashed the next blow, precision kamikaze drones aimed not at soldiers, but at the electronic eyes of Moscow. Flying barely 100 feet above the rooftops, UJ-26 drones skimmed through the urban canyons, guided by inertial systems and optical beacons. Their payloads were small 50 to 70 pounds of high explosives, but their targets were chosen with surgical care. The first wave dove into power distribution stations feeding the 96 L6 radar units. The blast did not topple the antennas, but it severed cables and delayed current flow. For a radar crew, that meant 2 or 3 seconds of blank screens. In combat measured by milliseconds, those seconds were deadly. Moments later, more drones struck communications cabins tied into the S-400 batteries. Operators watched their scopes flicker, misidentifying drones as birds, missiles as shadows, while urban reflections scrambled the Doppler filters. By the time systems rebooted, the Flamingo missiles had already crept over the radar horizon just 15 miles out and closing at 590 miles per hour. From control bunkers, Russian officers attempted intercepts, but geometry betrayed them. Low-flying missiles masked by city blocks and smoke clouds appeared only when nearly overhead. Panzer units launched volleys in desperation, their tracers arcing across the dawn sky, but the lock-ons slipped, confused by overlapping echoes and false returns generated by the chaos of drones. On the ground, Ukrainian infantry cheered as the first Flamingo thundered past barely above treetop height, hugging the avenues like a shadow. The drones hadn't destroyed Russia's radar shield, they had bent it, broken its timing, and twisted its perception. And in that bent window, the cruise missiles advanced unhindered, turning seconds of blindness into a corridor wide enough to strike directly at the heart of Moscow's command. The radar delay opened by the kamikaze drones gave Ukraine only seconds of breathing room, but commanders seized it with an unexpected twist. As the Flamingo missiles skimmed deeper into Moscow's air grid, a new wave emerged, not machines alone, but living wings. From concealed launch cages near the perimeter, flocks of trained ravens burst into the sky, each bird fitted with thumbnail-sized reflectors and lightweight sensors. To Russian radar crews already drowning in static, the sudden scatter of echoes appeared like dozens of phantom drones. Targeting systems cluttered with false returns, and operators wasted precious interceptors on empty air. At the same time, smoke-generating drones drifted low over the general staff compound, releasing thick plumes that rolled down streets like morning fog. In less than 3 minutes, the massive headquarters was shrouded in an artificial storm cloud that bent laser rangefinders and blurred thermal sights. The fortress that once seemed unassailable now looked more like a haunted ruin, its outlines flickering behind layers of gray. Under this eerie veil, Ukrainian sappers advanced. Robotic crawlers the size of lawnmowers crept towards secondary gates and underground access points. Guided remotely and shielded by the fog, they carried shaped charges in their belly compartments. At 5:12 a.m., synchronized detonations shook the compound's rear entrances. Concrete barriers cracked, steel doors warped, and smoke mixed with dust in choking waves. Inside the haze, infantry squads slipped through the ruptures, their silhouettes moving like shadows among the wings of circling ravens. Russian defenders fired wildly into the mist, but every muzzle flash only revealed their own positions. The battlefield had become a surreal collage of birds wheeling overhead, drones humming through fog, and robotic charges exploding at choke points. What had begun as a radar blind spot had now transformed into an all-encompassing illusion. Wings, smoke, and chaos binding Russia's defenses in knots. And through that chaos, the path to the heart of the General Staff compound was pried wide open. The black fog still hung over the General Staff compound when Russia struck back. From the outskirts of Moscow, convoys from the 147th Automobile Base roared forward, columns of BTR-82 seconds and BMP infantry carriers charging down the highways at nearly 40 miles per hour. Fuel trucks and mobile artillery followed close behind, their engines echoing off the city's concrete canyons. The intention was clear: overwhelm the attackers with sheer weight of steel and manpower before the heart of command collapsed. But the streets were no longer theirs. Every major approach had been seeded minutes earlier by Ukrainian mine-laying robots. As the first convoy reached a choke point, shaped charges hidden in service tunnels detonated, tearing holes through asphalt and collapsing the overpass above. The lead BTR erupted in flame, blocking the lane, while the following vehicles swerved into side streets littered with more mines. Overhead, Russian Mi-28 and Ka-52 gunships screamed into the fight, swooping to strafe advancing Ukrainian tanks. Yet, as they lined up their runs, Patriot-packed 3 interceptors hidden on the outskirts locked on. In blinding streaks, 2 helicopters were ripped from the sky, crashing into government parking lots in balls of fire. Survivors scrambled from the wreckage only to be pinned down by Ukrainian infantry squads pressing through the smoke. On the ground, the clash grew brutal. T-72 tanks met Russian armor head-on in narrow boulevards, treads grinding against broken pavement. RPG fire cracked from windows at ranges of barely 100 feet, while infantry exchanged bursts of gunfire from building to building. The haze of smoke drones blurred sight lines, forcing close-quarters fighting that favored Ukraine's smaller, mobile teams. By 5:30 a.m., the district had turned into a cauldron. Russian reinforcements kept pouring in, but every route they took was disrupted. Bridges collapsed under timed charges, avenues blocked by burning wrecks, intersections riddled with mines. Air defenses fired wildly at shadows overhead, wasting missiles on decoys and sensor echoes from the Ravens still circling. The battle had reached its fever pitch. Armor clashed in the streets, gunships fell from the sky, and infantry fought at arm's length. In the chaos, one truth became clear: the fog of war was no metaphor. It was real, physical, and it was suffocating Moscow's defenders as Ukraine pressed closer to the core of Russia's military nerve center. The street battles raged with no end in sight. Russian convoys tried to push through burning choke points, and gunships circled in desperation. But the Ukrainian assault had already cleared the path. At 5:41 a.m., the decisive blow arrived. 2 Flamingo cruise missiles, masked by the fog of drones and smoke, skimmed barely 70 feet above the rooftops before slamming into the compound. The first missile drove straight through the command bunker, its delayed fuse warhead collapsing the energy backbone. Lights flickered across the facility, then steadied, but nothing worked. The second missile came seconds later, tearing into the fiber optic hub that linked Moscow's field units to the high command. Screens inside the war room glowed with static, radios hissed with silence, and officers shouted into dead channels, unaware that their command had already been severed. Outside, the air shimmered with smoke and flames. Ukrainian T-72 seconds pushed to the perimeter, their barrels trained on the compound, while infantry raised blue and yellow flags over captured checkpoints. Overhead, drones circled and streamed the inferno live, capturing the image of Russia's proudest fortress engulfed in fire and static silence. The heart of Moscow's command structure had been pierced, and the nerve center lay broken. The twin Flamingo strikes had done what the armor and infantry could not. They gutted the fortress from the inside. The general staff of the armed forces still stood in concrete and stone, but its heartbeat was gone. Servers lay silent, radios dead, and officers cut off from every front. Strategically, Moscow's ability to coordinate multi-front operations evaporated, leaving scattered units to fight alone. The question now loomed: if the command hub in the capital could fall, was any bastion secure? Ukraine's commanders opened corridors for wounded Russians, proving the fight was against systems, not civilians. Above it all, a column of smoke towered thousands of feet high, marking the fall of